Hello, I'm Dr. Mikey Mewborn, and this is Church Ministry. Today we're looking at the topic, Basics for Administration. This is a great topic because a lot of us know the idea behind an administrator. An administrator is someone who oversees the processes or tasks done within a church. Sometimes churches have church administrators. Those people often oversee the building, the grounds, and occasionally they'll oversee church staffs and volunteers and things like that. But the church administrator has such an important job to juggle all the different aspects of coming up with a plan or a process to accomplish a certain goal or a task. And so we're going to look at an introduction on church administration today. And so this is going to be a really good topic for us to jump into. It's good to be with you. Let's begin our study. Hello and welcome to Church Ministry. Today we're talking about the topic, Basics for Administration. We're getting our outline notes from Robert Welch's book, Church Administration. It's good to be with you today. Let's jump into our study. I want to begin with an introduction about administration, and I want to begin by looking at the book of Exodus. In Exodus 18, verses 21 through 23, we have this wonderful conversation between Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, and Moses. It says, "Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you. You will be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace." And so Jethro is telling Moses here that there is a better way in order to organize the people of Israel and how to take care of the different issues that are within the camp or within the community. So I want you to see just a few things here that are so special for us to look at. I want to talk about a little bit about the leadership principles from the book of Exodus. And we see, number one, God appoints leaders. Well, we know that because we see that in the person of Moses. Number two, God expects leaders to function effectively. So one of the things that God puts you in a place to do is to work out. Now, to say that God expects something is kind of unique. We have to look in the theological aspect of that sometimes, but just in general, when we think of terms, God places you in a certain place for you to perform or to do something that He's called you to do. And so God expects leaders to function effectively. And thirdly, no leader can work alone, meaning that we need other people to work alongside of us or with us to accomplish great things. Then as we continue on, number four, God often provides advisors and assistants for jobs. So when a person is doing a certain job, a lot of times God will provide them with insight or advice upon which they should use to better their job or what they're actually trying to work out and work through. Number five, delegation is a biblical principle. We see it throughout the Scripture in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, people delegating and God calling them to do so. And then number six, individuals who are delegated should be qualified for tasks. Now, this is important because we need to make sure that we know who the people are and are they qualified to do the very task that they've been given. So that's an important thing when you're thinking about leadership principles in the book of Exodus. All right? But as we continue on, just through this introduction of administration, we see a couple of passages from the New Testament. 1 Corinthians 14:26. "What then, brothers? When you come together, each one has a hymn, a lesson, a revelation, a tongue, or an interpretation. Let all things be done for building up." And it's really building up one another, spurring one another on toward righteousness. In 1 Corinthians 14:33, just a few verses later, "For God is not a God of confusion, but a God of peace." And what it's saying there is that God is a God of order. He's one who sets things in place, in motion for the future, of course. Now, I also want us to look at the description of administration in the church. And so I've got several things to list here that I think are helpful for us. Administration, number one, is not practical versus spiritual. And we see some passages that are going to go along with all of these comments and all these statements. So administration is not practical versus spiritual. It's really both, and so it's not one against the other. Administration concerns the minister's total task. So whatever the minister is tasked with, administration is involved in all of that. Administration is brought about by scholarly study. Administration is an art to be practiced. Administration is primarily concerned with persons, not processes. Sometimes we find ourselves focused in on a process, and that we would push our way through people or hurt people in order to accomplish something such as a process. But really, in true administration, the people are the main variable. They're the main aspect, the main ingredient within what's going on within the administration. All right. Now, as we continue on, number 6, administration is the means to an end. So you're administering something or administrating something and saying, we are going to get to something. We are going for a goal. We're going to complete a task. We're going to fulfill something. And that's important. Number 7, administration is an orderly process. Number 8, administration is the preserver of peace, not the producer of conflict. And number 9, administration is a source of fellowship. I love this last statement here that we see, number 9, because when things are done correctly, when you have a great administrator, a great leader, great influencer, all those types of things, but someone that sees the big picture, it is a powerful source of fellowship. It creates a fellowship type of atmosphere within an organization, and it's very, very amazing. All right. Now, kind of in the idea of the introduction of administration, there's also this aspect of the historical side of it, the historical philosophy of administration. So what have the schools of thought been on this? So we're just going to look at a few of them. You can read more about these in your book. The scientific school: discover the best way to accomplish a task. Discover the best worker to accomplish the task. Provide incentives for the workers, and then provide close supervision by the manager. And so this would be a scientific school. So you're looking at how do you accomplish a task? Who's the best person for the task? Do you have incentives for that person? And then is there close supervision to kind of manage them or watch over them and kind of control the atmosphere? And so that's a scientific method that's been given for a lot of years. I also want to show you another one called the Human Behavior School. And so we see this one given to us by Elton Mayo. The Human Problems of an Industrial Civilization is a work that he wrote there. And Elton Mayo discovered that neither issues of physical fatigue, monotony, or an environmental issue such as lighting affected production. So the perception of the worker by management and the workmanship of the worker were of greatest value. So what he's saying is that in his understanding is that the perception of the worker by the management, so in other words, how the worker thinks the managing or the administrators looking at him or her and how do they think that they're doing, that really matters for productivity. And then also the workmanship of the worker, those types of things are going to have the greatest value. So what is the worker producing, and then how do they think that the management is perceiving them? And that's important. That's what he's talking about in the Human Behavior School. So that's another school of thought when you're thinking about administration. And then the Management Process School, Henry Fayol, he talks about it in a couple of terms: technical, producing and manufacturing products; commercial, buying raw materials and selling products; financial, acquiring and using capital; security, protecting employees and property; accounting, the functions of guiding the organization. Fayol defined the management with a process, not just a position. And so he kind of sees it more along those lines, and that's a focus there. And so he comes up with this this work here, General and Industrial Management, a picture of him in his earlier years there. And then he says that there's 5 functions of a manager, and that manager should kind of hone in on these. Number 1, planning. Number 2, organizing. Number 3, commanding. Number 4, coordinating. And number 5, controlling. And so working through that process, he's saying these managers are vital to an organization truly flourishing. And so this is another model that we're looking at there. And then there's another school, the quantitative school. Formulate the problem, construct a mathematical model, derive a solution, test the model and solution, establish controls over the solution, and put the solution to work. And so this is a focus that is given to us in the quantitative school of saying, how do you work through issues within administration? So it's not just process, it's not just people in general, but it's saying, okay, what are you trying to accomplish? And that's kind of the model there. And then the total quality management approach. Remain customer focused is another approach. Systems thinking, leadership, continuous improvement, and then shared decision making. And so this is another idea of a management approach for people. How do we come at it? Okay, so what does the customer, what do they need? How do we get that to them? Thinking outside the box. Then what's the leadership doing to help that take place? How are you getting better is the evaluation process. And then sharing decisions as you move forward. And those things are very important. All right. Now, a couple of quotes here that I think are important that are given to us by Robert Welch. Management is a technical term that describes the leadership given to an organization and the process for providing the personnel, physical, and fiscal resources to meet defined goals. So this is a definition of management given us by Welch. Then Welch goes on to say administration is described as the process of utilization of the personnel, physical and fiscal resources in order to meet the organization's objectives and goals. And so it's a little bit different just as far as the definition, but what he's going to explain here in his book is that it's easy to become a bad manager. It's easy to become that because the focus can, if you're not careful, it can be off. But an administrator has so much more influence and leadership capabilities just because of what their calling is and what they're trying to accomplish. And so we see here the differences between managers and administration. And I want you to see as we go through this, managers tell you what to do. Managers see the right work is done. Managers provide leadership with ways to identify objectives and goals. So you see what the managers are accomplishing. Over on the right-hand side, we see administrators. Administrators don't just tell you what to do, they explain how to do it. Administrators see to it that the work is done right. It's different than with the managers. The managers see that the right work is done. And so it's more of kind of the process, the work is done in the right way. And then administrators lastly supervise people in order to meet high standards and goals. Now that's a little bit on a different side of the coin than managers. Managers provide leadership with ways to identify objectives and goals. And so you can see here that administrators, it's just a little bit different focus and a little bit different attention is placed in certain areas. And so that's what you're seeing in these differences. Now, can they both be very good for any kind of corporation, nonprofit, or maybe in the church world? We have to be careful with the idea of managers in the church world, or maybe even administrators. Sometimes those terms can be so focused on business, it almost pulls away what God's doing. But I think they are very appropriate terms when you're thinking about what a person does. And so administrator is sometimes a wonderful word to explain what someone does that's in the church world. Maybe you've heard the phrase before, church administrator. That's someone who usually oversees a lot of the issues involving maybe the building and grounds. Maybe it's something where the staff is going through some changes, and the administrator will help work through that. Maybe it's working through a difficult issue, and so an administrator would be very helpful, kind of giving you some steps to work through those types of things. And so these can be helpful ways of looking at what it really means. And then I want you to see here definition of administration that's given to us by Robert Welch as well. Administration is defined as the art and science of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling the work of others to achieve defined objectives and goals. And so I want us to think through this a little bit, because we're talking about the topic of church administration. And so in this, there is an art and a science to how it's done. And there has to be a special way that it's done, and it needs to be done in a biblical way, in a godly way, in a loving way, a generous way, building one another up in righteousness, all those types of things. And so if that's going to happen, there's going to be elements of organization, leadership, controlling the work environment, controlling what's going forth, and I think this is a helpful way for us to look at it, all right? Well, this has been Basics for Administration. It's so good to be with you today. Hope you have a great rest of the day. God bless you, and bye-bye. All right, that concludes our study about the basics for administration. I love this topic. I love especially looking at the differences between managers and administrators. Of course, they can carry a lot of the same type of positional work or the same type of task-related functions, but as far as what they accomplish and what they do and their philosophy for why they do it, it's neat to see the differences there. So anyways, this is a wonderful topic. I hope you've enjoyed this lesson today. It's good to be with you today. God bless you, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.